I think it's twofold, Kieran. There is an understanding that it is necessary for the Australian government to do what is necessary to keep Australians safe, and that includes having a ban on flights, and that's nothing that's particularly novel, actually. But there is also a disbelief that a particular cohort of Australian citizens abroad have been targeted and effectively threatened with criminal sanctions, including substantial fines and potentially jail, if they seek to come back to Australia. So there is an element of disbelief and, in particular, anger over the inconsistency in that regard.
Has it been suggested to you that the ban is racist? And if so, do you agree with that assessment?
That has been expressed to me by some of my constituents, and I must say it's been expressed across a range of people, not only people of Indian descent. There is a view from these people who are impacted by it, but I think overall the view seems to be one of inconsistency and incompetence. Effectively, the Prime Minister is saying the reason why we need to impose these sanctions is because our quarantine facilities aren't up to scratch, and they've known for some time, and they've had that Halton report sitting there saying that there needed to be scenarios where we could have a surge capacity requirement, and that has been ignored. So there is a feeling by some people that this does have an element of racist undertones, but also there is that feeling of incompetence, and these are people who are directly impacted by it.
So do you think it is racist then?
I'm not saying it's racist. I think it's incompetent, but certainly I can't discount the views of many of my constituents who feel that because they are impacted by it.
What do you make of the government's message and overall response here? Obviously, they're saying, the PM and other senior ministers, that their number one priority is to stop another wave of the virus here.
Well, that's well understood, and it's the first duty of the Australian government to keep Australians safe, but that means they need to be kept safe wherever they are, in Australia or abroad. And the fact is that this government has failed in its duty of care to Australian citizens who are located overseas. There's some 9,000 Australian citizens in India, 650 of whom are vulnerable. So it's well understood that we need to keep Australians safe, but at the same time it is the inconsistency and it is the shambolic way in which this was not only announced but how it's been handled since. It's complete wrong end of the telescope now to see that we have ministers sitting down with people trying to explain the situation that they've gotten into. The reality is that there was a complete lack of transparency. This announcement was made in the middle of the night, and that included an express announcement about the threat of fines and jail terms. And we had the Prime Minister out there yesterday saying that this wasn't going to be enacted, that there certainly wouldn't be a circumstance that he could foresee where these sanctions would be given effect. So it begs the question, why was a deal made about this in the first place? Why was this announcement made? Why is he seeking to walk back on it now? And I'll tell you what really is getting a lot of people's goat over this. The Prime Minister yesterday going out saying people are criticising me for making tough decisions. This isn't the first tough decision I've made and I expect people to criticise me now. The fact is, you just want to say to the Prime Minister, this is not about you. This is about people whose families and loved ones and colleagues are directly impacted by this decision that is being made, impacted in a very real sense. And to have a specific cohort of Australian citizens singled out in this way, that inconsistency is really rubbing a lot of people up the wrong way.
Now, on another matter, you gave a speech earlier in the day on government-owned companies, enterprises, and saying that there needs to be contextual restraint, was the phrase that you used, when it comes to the expenditure of taxpayer money. Can you elaborate on what your thinking is there?
Certainly. Well, this is something I've been reflecting on for a while, and in the wake of the saga that we've seen going on at Australia Post and the some $77 million in bonuses that NBN handed out during the recession, I think it makes sense to examine this is taxpayers' money and what does the public expect, but not only that, what is good governance for these government business enterprises? I think that it's important that we have efficiencies and we have the best people working at these institutions. But at the same time, we shouldn't be adopting the worst excesses of corporate culture. We shouldn't be handing out bonuses during a recession when people are taking wage cuts and losing their jobs. So we need to exercise that level of restraint, but also recognise that this is taxpayers' money that we're talking about here, and the public needs to have confidence in these very important government business enterprises that permeate every aspect of our lives.
So would that contextual restraint be relevant to, say, those Cartier watches at Australia Post?
Well, certainly, and we have a Senate inquiry on foot at the moment that's examining these matters, and it goes to defining what the problem is. The problem here being that was there sufficient guidance given to the board? Did the board follow that guidance? And I think, again, this goes to defining what the problem is and being prepared under those various acts and tools that we already have at our disposal, making some modest improvements that I think could go a very long way to improving public confidence and not get to the stage that we are now.
Michelle Rowland, thanks for your time.
Pleasure.